Welcome to my lectures in the YouTube channel Livestock Products Technology. Today we are starting a new series with a new topic as we have discussed 4 lectures related to spoilage and I told we will talk about preservation of fish. So today we are starting a new series on preservation of fish and this is the first lecture. In this lecture, we will have an overview about the preservation of fish, about why preservation, what is the purpose and requirement, what are the basic principles and methods of preservation, and briefly I will touch different methods of preservation for fish, and later on we will have separate topic in details about the each method of preservation. First, let us understand why preservation is necessary. So, sometime the more fish will be caught, then it can be marketed. So, the extra fish has to be kept properly for future marketing without affecting their quality. Secondly, there is a proper method required to preserve this surplus fish in a good condition for future marketing. And sometimes fishermen cannot return promptly with fresh fish they have caught. So naturally there should be temporary ways to preserve the fish before they come home or before they take care of proper preservation. Many times it is important to educate the fishermen to preserve their catch in a temporary way. So these are some of the important aspects to understand why preservation of fish is very important. So once again we will understand why preservation is required or reasons for preservation. The dictionary meaning of the word preserve is to keep safe, retain quality, prevent decomposition or fermentation. So preservation is to maintain the quality of fish for a longer period of time for better supply, marketing and maintaining the quality. So preservation is to take care of the excess produce for marketing in areas where it is not available, makes the transportation and storage easier without affecting the quality, and preserving the fish at home wherever we have purchased in more amount in home or after catching, so it should be preserved in a proper condition without affecting the quality. So once again let us understand what is fish preservation. So preservation of fish is done to prevent spoilage, which we have already discussed. If it is not taken care, it will spoil, it will get deteriorated, its quality will be affected. So this lecture is also for the people involved in the production and marketing or for the consumers to understand the importance of spoilage and preservation. So since fish is very perishable, it is therefore necessary to preserve fish if not sold or consumed immediately. Whenever fish cannot be consumed or cooked or eaten, it should be preserved, or whenever it cannot be sold, it should be preserved within a shortest possible time. So fish preservation is the method of extending the shelf life of fish and other fishery products by applying scientific principles to maintain the quality of the products and to prevent the deterioration of the products. Now before we go further to discuss about the principles and method of preservation, let us understand the preliminary things, that is the first thing first, how to properly handle the fresh fish. So this we have discussed in details in the first lecture about handling of fish. Here briefly I want to repeat. So first of all, avoid exposing the fish to sunlight and keep them in a shaded area. Ice the fish immediately after catch to lower their temperature, to reduce the temperature and prevent the spoilage. Thirdly, to remove the gills and internal organs. So gills should be removed and organs, that is the viscera, should be removed. That extends the life or shelf life of the fish. Fourth, avoid soaking the fish too long in the water after death, as This easily spoils the fish. So generally we keep the fish in water. That's not a good practice. And finally, fifth, use mechanical refrigeration if there are facilities. So if there is a chilling facility, we should keep the fish in chilling at the earliest possible. So these are some of the common standard practice for fish before preservation. So here briefly I will tell the commonly practiced preservation methods for fish, which we all know. Of course, we are going to discuss each of them in full details in separate lectures, and later on now we will discuss some of the basic principles behind these preservation methods. So firstly, dehydration or drying. We all know the fish commonly preserved by drying, and that remove the moisture, so it prevents the microbial growth or microbial spoilage and enzymatic spoilage. We can see in the picture the drying of fish in the seashore. Then there is lowering temperature. This can be done by applying ice immediately or later on by keeping in the chilling system or refrigeration. And thirdly, increasing the temperature by heat treatment, either by pasteurization or by cooking or by other high heat processing, which again we will discuss later, like canning. And the fourth is using preservatives. There are different kind of preservatives like chemical preservatives or other antibiotics, or sometime nowadays other modern preservation, which we will discuss in the third lecture. Here we will see the basic principles of preservation. Firstly, the control of moisture, and by reducing the water activity. Moisture is very important for microbial growth. We are going to discuss all this later. So in that case, drying, salting, smoking or freeze drying, all this method reduce the moisture or water activity and prevent the microbial growth. Secondly, control of temperature by using ice, refrigeration or freezing. By reducing the temperature, we can stop the growth of microbes and prevent the spoilage. Then there is physical control of microbial loads through heating or ionizing radiation. Then chemical control of microbial loads by adding different acids or other chemical preservatives. And finally, about oxygen deprivation by reducing the availability of oxygen to the microbes, such as vacuum packaging. So even by modified atmosphere packaging, we can apply it for preservation. Now one by one we will discuss the principle of preservation and related methods. The first is the temperature control. As I told, when the temperature is controlled, the microbes cannot grow. It can be either at a lower temperature or at a higher temperature. So this decreases in temperature prevent the metabolic activity, prevent the enzymatic activity and prevent the microbial growth. So we can have it at around 0 degree or 0 to 10 degree, that is the chilling or refrigeration, and we can have it below 0 degree like minus 18 degree, that is the freezing. These are most common and commercially applied methods for large scale preservation of fish. So here the design is very important, like size, insulation, pelletization and management of cold stores are key for maintaining the quality. So we will discuss in details these methods in a separate lecture. Similarly, nowadays there is a concern about the use of refrigerant, the cooling gas which is used in the chilling system or freezing system. They are chlorofluorocarbons, so they are having serious damaging effect on the ozone layers. There is an environmental concern, so there is an alternative method is required. The second principle for preservation is moisture control. As we all know, the moisture is most essential requirement for microbial growth. So if we can prevent the availability of moisture, then we can prevent the spoilage and do the preservation. So this moisture availability is expressed as the water activity, and when the water activity is very low, that is below 0.8, the microbes cannot grow and we can preserve the food or the fish or the meat. So water is necessary for microbial growth and enzymatic activity. So several preservation techniques are based on this, like drying, salting, smoking and freeze drying. So in all these methods, the water activity is reduced, so the microbes cannot grow, enzymes cannot act, and the food is preserved or the fish is preserved. So the third principle is physical control of microbial load or microbial growth. In this case, the heat is most commonly used either for cooking or pasteurization or sterilization. Nowadays, modern method ionizing irradiation is used either for pasteurization or sterilization, and we also have modern methods like microwave heating. In all this method, the microbes will be killed and their growth is limited, so food or fish is preserved. In case of refrigeration, it requires some time refrigeration after the pasteurization, otherwise it may spoil or to have the better shelf life. Similarly, the sterilized products doesn't need any refrigeration. It can be stored in ambient temperature. Similarly, there is high heat processing like canning. So it is done in the sealed can at a high temperature processing. So it is a highly sterilized or fully sterilized. So it need not be kept at room at refrigeration, and it will have a long shelf life. Nowadays, there are separate pouches at heat tolerant retortable pouches which can be used for heat processing as good as canning. Now we will discuss about the chemical control. So here the principle is these techniques are designed to add antimicrobial agents or decrease the fish muscle pH. So when the pH is reduced, it is difficult for most of the microorganism to grow. Most of the microorganism has a optimum pH, and mostly it is at the neutral zone between 6 to 8. So when the pH goes below 4.5, most of the bacteria cannot multiply or grow except the halophilic bacteria. So the decrease in pH can be achieved by fermentation, by marinades, or by organic acids like acetic, citric or lactic acids in fish products, and this technique is often referred as biopreservation. Similarly, sometimes we can go for fermentation, that is also modern importance for biopreservation. So some of the common preservatives which are used like nitrites, sulfides, sorbates, benzoates, or some other natural preservatives like nowadays very common is essential oils or other phytochemicals. Now we will discuss other miscellaneous methods or combination. So first is control of oxidation reduction potential. Here the level of oxygen around the fish or fish products is reduced to increase its shelf life. So this can be achieved by vacuum packaging or by modified atmosphere packaging. So the oxygen level around the fish or fish products is reduced. So there are some specific combination of carbon dioxide, oxygen and nitrogen, which is also called as controlled atmosphere or modified atmosphere packaging. And the another last one is the combination of several techniques. Two or more of the different preservation techniques we have mentioned can be combined to improve the preservation efficiency. Some of the commonly practiced combinations are like pasteurization and refrigeration, modified atmosphere packaging and refrigeration, salting, drying together, that is curing and drying, or salting and smoking, that is curing and smoking, sometimes salting and smoking, and sometimes salting with marination, that is all other spices together. So now we will discuss some of the important or commonly used preservation techniques for fish. So based on the we have discussed different principles of preservation. Based on that, some of the commonly applied preservation methods are drying, smoking, freezing, chilling, brining or curing, fermentation, canning, and all these can extend the shelf life of fish or seafoods or meat and meat products. However, the low temperature storage and chemical techniques for controlling the water activity, enzymatic or oxidative or microbial spoilage are most common in the industry today. So low temperature storage and the reducing the microbial activity, these are most effective for industrial application. Now we will briefly discuss some of the commonly practiced methods for fish preservation, but those methods we are going to discuss in more details later on. So first of them is the physical method of preservation like drying and curing. So as I mentioned just before, that is generally drying is done after application of salt, so that becomes a combination, and that's a very old practice, simple method widely used for preservation of fish, and which can reduce the moisture content and reduce the water activity, and thereby it increase the shelf life. So here is a table which says the water activity minimum required for the uh, for the for the growth of different category of organisms. So by using the salt and drying, we can go below this level, and then their growth will be prevented. So in case of bacteria, it is 0.91, for yeast 0.85, for molds 0.8, for halophilic bacteria 0.75, for xerophilic bacteria 0.65, and osmophilic bacteria 0.6. So now we will talk briefly about the thermal control for preservation of fish. So the most common is the chilling, as we have discussed earlier. So chilling includes the use of wet ice or refrigerated seawater or chill air, sometimes solid and liquid forms of carbon dioxide or liquid nitrogen. The fish should be cooled to chilling temperature, that is around 0 to 5 degrees Celsius immediately after capture. The preservative effect of chilling is due to its ability to reduce the growth rate of spoilage microorganisms and their metabolic activities or their enzymatic activities, and thus it maintains the quality changes or deterioration to the minimum. So low temperature prevents or reduces the growth rate of microbes and activity of enzymes. However, such treatments can extend the shelf life only for few days, as certain endogenous autolytic enzymes or microbial enzymes can deteriorate the quality in a short run, because they will not be fully inactivated, slowly they will be active. So after few days the food or the fish or meat can get spoiled. Here briefly now we will discuss about ice chilling. So normal chilling, that is in refrigeration when it is not possible, the ice is the best option. So this is obtained by covering the fish with layers of ice. However, ice alone is not very effective for long preservation, because melting water brings about a sort of leaching of valuable flesh contents, and that can reduce the flavor. So if we keep long term in ice, the melted ice water causes leaching of the components. But ice is effective for short term preservation as needed to transport landed fish to the nearby markets or to processing plants. For a short term, maybe for about 12 hours, this is effective for preventing the spoilage and transporting the fish to the market or to the processing plant. Here we can see the commercial practice of chilling with ice. Either it is in the plastic crates or thermocol box or plastic sheet or sometime other metal boxes. So this is a common practice for applying the ice on the fish for transport and temporary storage. So now briefly we will talk about freezing. Freezing is a method of storing fish at below 0 degrees Celsius or minus temperature. So when the meat fish are kept below 0 degree, it get frozen, the water become ice. So at this temperature, no microorganism can grow, no enzyme can act, so we can achieve a long-term storage of fish. So earlier days or a common method of achieving this freezing by using the mixture of ice with salt, and it can give us a sub-zero temperature which can keep the fish in frozen condition. There is another technique called glazing, which I have discussed in the first lecture. So this is a practice of creating a thick layer of ice at the surface of the fish by dipping the fish in ice cold or ice with salt mixture layer by layer, and this gives a protection from exposure to atmospheric oxygen and prevent the rancidity. So these are the simple methods, but nowadays there are commercial facilities available for freezing. Either the freezer, small room like freezer, or there are bigger rooms constructed with minus temperature like minus 18 degrees Celsius is commonly used for freezing, and that gives a very long storage life for fish or meat. Here we can see in the photograph the commercial practice of freezing the fish or the processed fish after cleaning and making the slices or fillets, or we can also see in the bottom right corner the whole fish frozen. So this is a commercial practice for freezing of fish. So now briefly we will discuss about some chemical methods. The most common is curing. Curing is a term used for addition of salt. It's a age-old practice for applying salt in meat, fish for preservation. But in modern method of curing, along with salt, the sugar, nitrites or nitrates and some spices or phosphates are used. So salt is most widely used ingredient for curing, and its main property is to reduce the water activity and thereby prevents the microbial growth and act as a preservative. So in case of halophilic bacteria or halotolerant bacteria, they can grow even with salt and creates the white patches. So we will discuss more details in separate lecture about the curing methods of preservation. Another chemical method, very old and common practice, is smoking. So smoking is done by burning the wood, and the smoke is allowed to be absorbed on the fish or meat. So it's a kind of chemical preservation. So it involves also partial heat treatment, but the main effect is due to the chemicals present in the smoke. So smoke has both antimicrobial and antioxidant property. Here it causes some kind of surface drying also due to the lower heat effect, and also prevents the microbial invasion due to the formation of thick layer in the outside, and it also reduces the activities of the microbes, and also the effect of salt, which is undergoing first curing and then smoking. So in case of smoke, the main component is phenolic compounds and formaldehydes. So phenolic compound is very effective as antioxidant, and formaldehyde also act as antimicrobial. So chemical components here in smoke acts as a preservative. So the last method is the fermentation. This is again a old practice for encouraging the bacterial growth, which increases the acidity. Lot of beneficial bacteria, they grow by fermenting and producing acid and increase the acidity. So most of the organisms, pathogenic or spoilage, cannot grow. So sometimes salt is also added to prevent some of the spoilage organism. So fish paste is one of the common fermented fish product by fermentation. Similarly, there are other fish with rice fermented products which are common, and this can help in preservation. Nowadays there are modern advanced method for fermentation by using lactic acid bacteria. So those details we will discuss separately in other lectures. So now we are at the end of today's lecture. Today our focus was to have an overview about the preservation of fish. So we have discussed why preservation, what is the purpose, what are the basic principles and methods of preservation, and we have discussed briefly application of different principles like moisture control, temperature control, physical method, chemical method, and other miscellaneous or combination method. And briefly we have discussed about the common methods of preservation like salting or curing, the drying, and some of the heating process, some of the chilling and freezing methods, and briefly about the chemical method like curing or smoking. So all these methods we are going to discuss in details in subsequent lectures. Thank you. Hope it makes learning easy.